Step out of the vehicle, now! The voice was sharp, cracking like a whip through the cold night air. Red and blue lights danced across Amani's windshield, casting shadows on her steady hands, gripping the steering wheel. She didn't move. I said out. Hands where I can see them. 3 patrol cars, 4 officers, guns unholstered, all aimed at one woman sitting alone in a silver sedan. Amani blinked once, slowly, as if trying to anchor herself. Her pulse roared in her ears, but her voice, when it came, was measured. "I'm complying," she said, raising her hands just above the dash. "Please, stay calm." The lead officer wasn't listening. His boots pounded against asphalt as he approached. "License and registration. You move 1 inch wrong and I swear—" "I'm reaching now. Right hand only, no sudden moves," she replied. He didn't respond, just glared. His hand stayed on his holster. Traffic slowed nearby. A few phones pointed her way. She knew how this could end. Another headline, another viral hashtag. Amani took a breath so deep it felt like her ribs might crack. Inside, Amani was shaking. Not visibly, but deep in the gut, where panic lives. She kept her face unreadable, even as her thoughts spiraled. "Stay focused. Stay alive." "I'm reaching into my glove compartment," she said. "That okay?" The officer didn't answer, just watched her with narrowed eyes. His partner moved around the passenger side, one hand resting on a baton. They looked past her humanity and only saw a target. As she slowly handed over her documents, her voice remained calm. "Is there a reason I was pulled over?" No response, just tension. Unspoken, electric, dangerous. In her head, she ran through every workshop she'd ever attended on de-escalation. Irony's cruel grin, she'd taught some of them. But now, she was just another black woman on the side of the road, and every second that ticked by made her feel a little less safe. The officer leaned in, squinting at her ID like it was forged. "This your car?" he asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Or did you borrow it from someone who actually owns it?" Amani didn't flinch. "It's registered under my name." He chuckled, tossing her license to his partner. "Yeah, sure, leather seats, new model, clean interior. Doesn't really scream public school teacher, does it?" "I never said I was a teacher," she replied quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "No? Must be a nurse then. Or maybe just lucky." His eyes flicked over her outfit, professional, crisp. Still, he sneered. "Y'all love dressing up nice to play pretend." Amani clenched her jaw. Not because of the insult, she'd heard worse. It was the ease with which he said it, the confidence, like he'd done it 100 times and never once had to answer for it. "You know," he added, leaning closer, "you fit the profile. High-end car, tinted windows, wouldn't be surprised if you had a record." She looked him dead in the eye. "I don't." "Yet," he muttered. "Step out," he barked, yanking open the door. "Out, now." Amani did as told, slowly. She raised her hands again, keeping her tone even. "I haven't done anything wrong." His face twisted. "You think that matters?" As she stood against the car, he roughly patted her down. His hands anything but procedural. "You people always act innocent until the truth comes out," he said, almost under his breath. A crowd had started to gather. One man across the street had his phone up, filming. Another whispered, "What's going on?" to someone next to him. No one stepped in. "Don't you have anything better to do?" The officer barked at them, but no one moved. The cameras stayed up. Humiliation burned in Amani's chest. Her heart pounded, but she kept her spine straight. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She wouldn't give him that. "I said, don't move," he shouted, though she hadn't flinched. She looked toward the crowd. Eyes met hers. Some looked away. Others just kept filming, silent witnesses to another injustice on the side of an ordinary street. He pushed her harder against the car, gravel grinding into her knees. Her blazer was stained now. Her pride wasn't. "Am I under arrest?" she asked, her voice calm but clear. He didn't answer, just cuffed her wrists tighter, too tight. "Then what's the charge?" she asked again. Still nothing. Just his breathing, heavy, irritated. Like her composure was somehow offensive, but she wouldn't break, couldn't, not here, because this wasn't about guilt, it was about power. And even now, especially now, she wasn't giving hers away. Just as he reached for the cuffs, she spoke again, low, deliberate. "Check my ID again." The officer paused. "What?" "You missed something," she said without a trace of fear. "Look again." He rolled his eyes, pulled out her wallet, flipped it open carelessly, then stopped. His smirk evaporated. The wallet sagged in his hand. His fingers trembled, just slightly. The badge stared back at him. Federal, bold, unmistakable. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Behind him, one of the other officers leaned in. Sir?" He didn't respond, just stood there, silent, pale, jaw clenched like it was wired shut. Amani turned her head slightly, still on her knees. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Do you understand now why I was asking questions?" Silence. The crowd watched. The phones kept recording. And for the first time that night, it was him who looked trapped. They called it a rough neighborhood. Amani called it home. On the east side of Detroit, where boarded windows were more common than clean sidewalks, Amani's strength was forged early. Her mom worked double shifts at the nursing home. Her dad fixed cars and mentored teens after hours. The streets weren't kind, but her parents were steady, and their love taught her how to rise without stepping on others. In a place where ambition could easily be crushed, Amani's refusal to fold was the first sign that she was different. Even as a kid, she knew survival wasn't enough. She wanted justice. It was a Tuesday. She remembered because they were supposed to have tacos for dinner. Amani was 12, sitting on the porch when her dad waved goodbye to a neighbor and walked toward their front steps. Then the sirens came. A cop car screeched to a halt. Shouts followed. She didn't understand the words, but she'll never forget the sound of the gunshot. One moment her father was upright, smiling, and the next he collapsed. They thought he had a weapon, they said. He had a wrench in his hand. From that day the world tilted. Her heart cracked wide open, and something fierce settled inside her. A question burned. Who protects us from the ones who are supposed to protect? Some people expected her to grow bitter, but Amani grew focused. At 17, during a career fair, she approached a table labeled Law Enforcement Careers with steady eyes. Her counselor warned, "You sure you want to go down that road?" Amani didn't hesitate. "If I don't join, nothing changes." She didn't want revenge, she wanted reform. Her pain hadn't hardened her heart, it sharpened her mission. The very system that took her father. She was going to face it head-on. At Quantico, she wasn't just competing, she was outperforming. Highest marks, flawless evaluations. But it wasn't just her intellect that stood out, it was her control. While others cracked under pressure, Amani thrived. She didn't just graduate, she led. Yet, even with accolades pinned to her name, there were sideways glances in the elevator. Comments about her attitude in meetings, and assumptions that she must be a diversity hire. She pushed through them all. Not because they didn't sting, but because she remembered her purpose. Her badge wasn't just an achievement. It was armor, and she wore it for more than herself. Living in D.C., walking into rooms as Special Agent Amani Brooks, she commanded respect until she didn't. Some colleagues praised her professionalism, but others questioned her tone, her hair, her fit in the culture. Even within the bureau, prejudice slithered in subtle ways. The irony. She fought hate by day, only to feel it by night, in hushed whispers and tight smiles that never quite reached their eyes. To some, Amani's silence looked like surrender. But silence isn't always submission. Hers was studied, calculated. A legacy of growing up where loudness invited danger. She'd learned early, stay calm, stay alive. Her grace wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. And when used correctly, it was far more effective than rage. There were moments she never shared. like when a fellow agent joked about her being too polished for the hood, or when her superior asked her to smile more during briefings. Each slight stacked atop the last. She never exploded. She just logged it away, fuel for the fire she never let burn out. That Sunday felt like any other. Duffel bag in the trunk, her niece's birthday card on the seat. But as she crossed the Maryland state line, flashing lights blinked behind her. Again. "Ma'am, where exactly are you headed tonight?" Amani blinked, hands locked at 10 and 2, heart thudding in her chest. The red and blue glare pulsed through her windshield, and the officer's flashlight burned through the driver's side window. She met his stare, calm but cautious. "I'm on my way to visit my mom. An officer, is there a problem?" "No tail light issue, no speeding, so I'm just wondering, what brings you out this way, in a car like this?" His voice wasn't aggressive, just loaded. She stayed composed. "As I said, visiting family." The pause dragged. His eyes swept across the car's interior, settling too long on her FBI badge tucked near the cup holder. "You work for the Bureau?" "Yes." Another pause, then a smirk. "Well, ain't that something?" "Step out of the vehicle for me." Her grip on the wheel tightened just slightly. This wasn't unfamiliar. It just wasn't supposed to happen still. It had started with a look. Just an extra second. Back at the corner near the gas station, she'd seen him. Parked, engine running. Head turned slightly as she eased past in her Tesla. She knew that stare. Not curiosity, not boredom. The kind that cataloged her skin, her license plate, her success, as a threat. Amani had felt it too many times to mistake it. That prelude, the pretext before the flashing lights. Even then, she'd told herself, maybe he's just doing his job. But the job too often came wrapped in assumptions, and blackness behind the wheel was always enough. He didn't tail her aggressively, just presently. A shadow that never left. Amani watched him in the mirror. Turn after turn, he stayed 2 cars back. Close enough to control, far enough to deny. Her jaw locked, muscles coiled without permission. She adjusted her seatbelt, steadying her breath. She could feel the tension folding into her spine. He's not pulling you over, just ignore it. But the longer he lingered, the louder the warning in her gut. This wasn't traffic enforcement. This was surveillance disguised as protocol, and beneath her calm surface something old and unyielding was waking up. No greeting, no explanation, just the command. License and registration, now. Amani raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Her movements were deliberate, rehearsed. Every step is measured to avoid escalation. "May I ask the reason for the stop, officer?" He didn't respond, just took the documents, eyes never leaving hers. "You in a hurry to get somewhere?" "No, sir. As I said, visiting family." He glanced at her license again, lips tightening. Something about her answers irked him, like she wasn't afraid enough. She didn't flinch, but in his silence she could hear it, the need to assert, to remind her who held power. "So, a Tesla, huh?" His tone changed, casual but heavy with disbelief. "The FBI must pay better than I thought. Or maybe this was a gift." Amani didn't blink. "I earned it." He chuckled. "Sure you did, just not something you see every day, that's all." There it was, coded suspicion. The kind that wasn't written in reports but lived in every micropause, every condescending grin. Her car wasn't just a car. To him, it was evidence. Of what? He didn't say. He didn't have to. "So, your mom lives around here?" he asked, glancing at the houses lining the block. "Yes, this street, 3 houses up." He tilted his head, skeptical. "Funny, doesn't seem like the kind of neighborhood you'd be from." Amani held his gaze. "Maybe because you've never had to imagine someone like me belonging." He stared a moment longer, then looked away, lips pursed, as if her presence was a riddle he couldn't solve. While his fingers tapped the tablet, his other hand stayed unnervingly close to his holster. Not gripping, just resting. Like a casual threat. Amani noticed, of course. Trained eyes don't miss those things. But she didn't let it show. Don't move too quickly. Don't adjust the mirror. Don't breathe wrong. Her father had done none of those things. And still, the weight of memory pressed against her. But she stayed upright, expression unreadable. Composure was not safe, but it was the only armor she had left. And still, his hand didn't move. She answered calmly. She kept her voice soft. She smiled, even. But her restraint seemed to provoke him further. "Are you always this polite?" he asked, tone flat. "Yes, sir." "Too polite. Makes me think you're hiding something." Amani exhaled slowly. When de-escalation becomes suspicious, what's left? Doing everything right didn't make her innocent in his eyes. It made her dangerous. The silence pressed in. Amani glanced into the mirror, and suddenly it wasn't her reflection staring back. It was a 12-year-old girl. Backseat, frozen, blue lights, screams. Her father's hands raised. One gunshot, then stillness. The present blurred, and the past bled through. "Step out of the car, now!" The officer's voice thundered before Amani could even ask why. Her hands, still resting on the steering wheel, trembled ever so slightly. She turned her head slowly, her heart thudding behind her ribs. I haven't done anything wrong," she managed, her voice steady but soft. "I said now." The command sliced through the silence again, louder this time, crueler. With a deep breath, Amani unbuckled her seatbelt. Her legs moved before her mind did. She stepped out slowly, deliberately, as if any sudden motion might seal her fate. As her boots touched the pavement, she scanned his face for any signal of reason. Nothing. Just practiced hostility. This wasn't about a traffic violation. It never was. The air was thick with something more dangerous. Power unchecked and prejudice disguised in a badge. She knew the script, and she also knew how quickly things could spiral. Without warning, the officer yanked open her car door and leaned in aggressively. "Step back," he barked. Amani complied, her eyes wide but her mouth closed. Then came the chaos. He began rifling through her glove compartment, tossing papers onto the ground like they meant nothing. Her laptop bag followed, spilling open on the street. "Is this your idea of clean?" he muttered mockingly. She watched, helpless, as her journal landed face down on the curb. Next went her purse, its contents scattered like confetti. Lipstick, receipts, an old photo of her and her dad. Each item flung was another piece of her privacy dismantled in public view. He kicked aside her makeup pouch, sneering. "Nothing in here but pretty little things, huh?" The shame felt physical now, wrapping around her chest and tightening. Strangers were beginning to notice, but no one moved. No one stopped him. He stood tall, smirking like he was proud of this show. She stood taller, doing her best to keep her tears from rising. Humiliation was the point, and dignity, in his eyes, was a privilege she didn't deserve. It started with one phone aimed at her, then another. A small group had formed, some filming, others pretending not to see. A young woman on the sidewalk muttered, "This isn't right," loud enough to be heard. The officer's eyes snapped toward her. "Mind your business unless you want to be next." The girl shrank back into the crowd, silence reclaiming the moment. Amani glanced around, faces filled with discomfort, not outrage. No one stepped forward, they just watched. She was both spectacle and ghost, visible yet ignored, documented but unsupported. The fear wasn't just hers now, it was collective. No one wanted to challenge the uniform, not here, not like this. And so, they let it happen. Every bystander, every camera lens, every downcast gaze became part of the scene. Complicit. Paralyzed. Afraid. "Where are you headed, Miss Proper?" the officer scoffed. "Your little accent is too clean for this part of town." She didn't reply. "Oh, I get it. You're one of those," he smirked. "College girl, thinking that degree makes you better than us." His tone oozed mockery, twisting her confidence into something shameful. Her voice, once her shield, was now a weapon used against her. "You always talk like that?" he jeered again, Trying to sound white won't save you. It wasn't just a comment. It was a strategy. Strip her of her identity, reduce her to a stereotype, and make sure she knew exactly where he believed she belonged. She barely had time to blink before his hands were on her. "Turn around," he snapped. "What? I haven't. You're resisting," he cut in, louder now, as if reciting a line he'd rehearsed. "I'm standing still," Amani cried. "That's it." He twisted her arm behind her back, the cold metal cuffs biting into her skin with a violence that wasn't necessary but fully intentional. She winced, trying not to cry out. "You think you're special?" he whispered near her ear. "You're just another smart mouth." People in the crowd gasped, but the cameras stayed steady. One man finally shouted, "She didn't resist." It didn't matter. The lie was already planted, already growing. In this moment, truth wasn't part of the equation. Control was. And the message was clear. Even silence could be spun into guilt if it served the narrative. Amani didn't flinch. She didn't plead, didn't scream. She met the chaos with eerie calm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Check my wallet." The officer narrowed his eyes. "What?" "In the front pocket. Open it." Something in her tone made him pause, like she knew something he didn't. He fished out the leather case, flipping it open with one hand while keeping the other near his weapon. The plastic ID slid out first, then the badge. Her badge. The gold shimmered in his hand. His entire demeanor changed, instantly. "FBI," he muttered, blinking. Amani stood motionless, letting the silence stretch. His hand dropped from his weapon. The confidence drained from his face like someone had flipped a switch. Behind him, murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. "She's FBI? Did he just cuff a federal agent?" The officer swallowed hard, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. But nothing about her had changed. Only his illusion of her had shattered. He started to speak, stopped, then stammered. "There must be some mistake." Amani said nothing. She didn't have to. Now the cameras turned. Not on her, but on him. The same phones that once documented her humiliation now captured his disgrace. A teenage boy whispered, "Yo." "He's done." The officer fumbled with the cuffs, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to unlock them. Amani didn't move, didn't help. She stood tall, her silence louder than any accusation. Someone in the crowd chuckled, dry and bitter. Another murmured, "That's what he gets?" It wasn't just an embarrassment. It was the shift. An entire narrative collapsing under the weight of truth. And for once, justice stood in plain sight. He finally unlatched the cuffs and stepped back like nothing had happened. "Sorry about that. Just a misunderstanding," he said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Amani arched an eyebrow, but didn't respond. "You know, these things happen. Gotta be careful out here," he added, louder now, addressing the crowd as if his mistake needed softening. But no one was buying it. The cameras stayed fixed. The silence around him was no longer passive. It was judgmental. He chuckled nervously, glancing at the badge in her hand, the one that silenced him more effectively than any protest ever could. Her voice cut clean through the tension. "What's your badge number?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" She took a step forward. No anger, no yelling, just certainty. "Your badge number. I need it now." The man hesitated, then rattled off the digits like a schoolboy caught cheating. "Thank you," she said quietly, slipping her own badge back into her wallet. This time, the cameras didn't just film a cop abusing power. They filmed accountability, a role reversal. A woman who'd been dragged through the dirt now stood unshaken, holding the system to its own standards. And it wasn't over, not yet. Amani didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She unlocked her phone and pressed a name, one that the officer wouldn't expect. "I need Supervisory Special Agent Daniels. Tell him it's Agent Amani Pierce. Immediate escalation." The officer blinked, confused. His hand, still near his holster like muscle memory, wouldn't let him drop it. "You don't want to do this," he said. But even he didn't sound convinced. Amani turned slightly, just enough for the crowd to catch her voice. He already knows what's happening. With that one call, the balance started to shift. Not with shouting, but with unshakable control. "Yes, sir," she said into the phone. "Unlawful detainment, public humiliation, no Miranda, no cause, officer badge number unknown, yet." Her voice was unwavering, her words surgical. The man who had dragged her from her car just minutes ago now stood frozen, sweating beneath the brim of his hat. She continued. Property scattered on the pavement. Use of force initiated without resistance. Civil rights clearly violated, witnesses present. Amani didn't look at him as she spoke. She didn't need to. His shifting posture, the darting glances, those told the story. "Yes, I'll remain on site," requesting immediate field intervention. The crowd sensed it now. This wasn't about a routine stop anymore. It was about consequences long overdue. Amani took a breath. Then, turning to the officer, she asked calmly, "What's your badge number?" His lips barely moved. 4826, he muttered. She raised her voice, letting the words echo. "Badge number 4826, officer involved in racial profiling and unlawful conduct. Name to follow." Phones lifted higher. The crowd heard. The internet would hear next. She wasn't just calling him out, she was making sure everyone else remembered his name too. Daniels didn't waste time. His voice boomed through the speaker like a gavel. "We've got your location, Agent Pierce. He'll be off the streets tonight. Internal Affairs has already been notified." The officer stepped back. His earlier smugness cracked, then crumbled completely. "Keep your phone on. We're dispatching uniformed personnel. Full documentation, body cam footage, witness statements, all of it." Amani gave a slight nod. "Thank you, sir," she said. Justice wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a promise with a timestamp. "Look, maybe we just got off on the wrong foot," the officer stammered. Amani didn't respond. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We're all under pressure. You know how it is out here. Can we just move past this?" His eyes darted nervously between her phone and the crowd. It was just a misunderstanding, but his voice trembled, and the words fell flat. What once sounded like authority now sounded like fear, trying to hide behind fake remorse. Amani finally met his eyes. No anger, no raised tone, just the truth. "You didn't stumble," she said. "You meant every word." He looked away. "You saw my skin before you saw my humanity. You reached for power instead of protocol." Each sentence struck deeper than any shout could have. She wasn't here to educate him. She was here to hold him accountable for every name that never got this chance. Another squad car pulled up. The door opened and a younger officer stepped out. He scanned the scene, then turned to Amani with a slight nod. "Agent Pierce, I've been briefed," he said, tone respectful, posture firm. No smirks, no suspicion. Then, without a word, he looked at his colleague, the one who had profiled her, and shook his head. The silence between them said more than words could. One uniform had acted with prejudice. This one came with purpose. Claps broke through the silence. One, then several, then a wave. It wasn't for her badge. It wasn't for her title. It was for her courage, for standing when so many were forced to kneel. Amani didn't turn to accept it. She didn't raise her hands or smile. The applause wasn't valid. It was recognition. And for the first time, the silence that once protected the unjust had been shattered. Even as the crowd clapped, Amani stood still. Her hands tightened slightly, not in anger, but in memory. She blinked hard, swallowing the wave of emotions rising fast. This wasn't victory. It was a moment stolen from grief. Not everyone got this ending. Some names were hashtags. She stood not in celebration, but in solemn defiance, quietly holding space for the silenced. She whispered it, barely audible over the fading applause. "This is for my father." He'd raised her to believe in justice, even when it turned its back. He never got to see her wear the badge. But in that moment, when the power finally shifted, His legacy stood tall through her. Amani leaned forward over the desk, her voice steady. "I'm filing a formal complaint against Officer James Carter. I want this documented." The woman across from her nodded, typing swiftly. For the first time, Amani's truth wasn't just spoken, it was recorded, sealed in protocol, and placed where silence once lived. She didn't just stand up, she moved the system to take notice. 2 days later, an internal memo was released. "Officer James Carter has been suspended, pending a full investigation," it read. "No badge, no gun, just consequences." Whispers turned into headlines. His name, once protected by silence, was now tied to misconduct. The machinery of accountability had begun turning, and this time it wouldn't stall. The video hit 1 million views before the evening news even caught up. There she was, calm, firm, unflinching. There he was, hostile, then helpless. Comments flooded in. "She's a hero. This is what strength looks like. No more hiding behind uniforms." The internet didn't just share her story, they amplified it. Across hashtags and timelines, Amani became a symbol of justice in a world where truth often goes unnoticed. She hadn't meant to go viral, but when injustice is public, exposure becomes a form of power. Hen asked for interviews. Amani never flinched. "I didn't do anything special," she'd say. "I just did what was right." But the public saw more. They saw courage wrapped in calm. They saw dignity in the face of disrespect. And in that grace, they saw the strength to keep going. At the town hall forum, the crowd hushed as Amani took the mic. "This was never just about me," she began. "It's about every voice ignored, every plea dismissed." She paused, letting silence speak louder than outrage. "I was lucky enough to be heard, but there are names we'll never know. Justice isn't done until we fight for them, too." The applause wasn't for a speech, it was for a mission. At that moment, she wasn't a victim. She was a vessel for change. The department, under growing public pressure, issued a statement. "Effective immediately, we are implementing mandatory racial sensitivity training and revising our engagement protocols." It wasn't everything, but it was something. And in a system often deaf to criticism, even a whisper of reform felt like thunder. Amani read the announcement twice, then once more. Small steps, but forward. The wind whispered through the cemetery trees as she knelt beside the headstone. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, placing her folded badge at the base. "I did what you taught me. I stood tall, even when it shook me inside." Her fingers lingered on the engraved name. This wasn't closure, it was continuation. His absence had always been her fuel. Now, it was also her peace. She whispered it so quietly, only the earth could hear. "I kept my promise." The same words she'd vowed when they lowered him into the ground. The same ones that carried her through fear, silence, and fire. It wasn't victory, it was fulfillment. And the story, though quieter now, was far from finished. You're in her position. The badge in your pocket, the weight of silence pressing down. Would you speak up? Would you risk everything for justice? Racism doesn't just live in headlines, it hides in daily moments. Have you faced injustice? Tell us. Your voice could be the one that helps someone else finally speak out. Each like is more than a click, it's a signal, a stand. Let the algorithm know that stories like Amani's deserve to be heard. Subscribe now to follow narratives that challenge the system, confront racism, and celebrate resilience. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're fuel for change. Be part of it.